I still remember the night Kelly first brought it up. We were sitting on the couch in our tiny apartment, a bottle of wine nearly empty between us. The glow of the TV lit up her face, but her expression wasn't the relaxed, happy one I was used to seeing. "James," she said, her voice tentative, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied, setting my glass down and turning toward her. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her sweater, and for a moment, I thought she might be about to confess something serious. "What do you think about open relationships?" I blinked, the question hanging in the air like an unwelcome guest. "Open relationships?" "Yeah," she said, her voice gaining a bit more confidence. "You know, where both people can explore other connections while still being together." My first instinct was to laugh, thinking she was joking. But the look on her face stopped me cold. She wasn't joking. The conversation that followed was one of the most surreal of my life. Kelly explained how she'd been reading articles, listening to podcasts, and talking to friends who were exploring non-monogamy. "It's not about not loving you," she said quickly, as if she could sense my growing discomfort. "It's about expanding our relationship, allowing us to grow as individuals while staying committed to each other." "Committed?" I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. "You're talking about seeing other people. How is that commitment?" Her face fell, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then, I remembered why we were having this conversation in the first place. "This just feels out of nowhere," I said. "We're engaged, Kelly. We're supposed to be planning our wedding, not talking about dating other people." "It's not out of nowhere," she replied, her voice quiet but firm. "I've been thinking about this for a while." I didn't want to bring it up because I was afraid of how you'd react. But I can't ignore it anymore, James. This is important to me. The weeks that followed were a blur of arguments, tense silences, and late-night discussions that went nowhere. Kelly insisted that this wasn't about me, that it wasn't because I wasn't enough. But no matter how she framed it, I couldn't shake the feeling that our relationship was slipping through my fingers. "You're not even giving it a chance," she said one night, her frustration boiling over. "You're just shutting it down without considering how it could work for us." "Because it's insane," I shot back. "How do you expect me to be okay with you sleeping with other people while we're supposed to be building a life together?" "It's not just about sex," she countered. "It's about freedom. Trust. Isn't that what a healthy relationship is supposed to be built on?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Trust? You're asking me to trust that you won't fall for someone else when you're literally inviting them into our relationship." Her eyes filled with tears, and she turned away, her shoulders shaking. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering how the hell we'd ended up here. After that night, it felt like Kelly and I were living in two different worlds. During the day, we went through the motions, work, errands, polite conversations that felt hollow. But at night, the distance between us grew unbearable. Every time I looked at her, I wondered if she was thinking about someone else. About this freedom she claimed to want so badly. It was like a third person had moved into our apartment, an invisible force driving a wedge between us. The breaking point came one Saturday morning. Kelly had been quiet all week, and I could tell she was building up to something. "I've made a decision," she said over breakfast, her voice steady but her eyes avoiding mine. I put down my coffee mug, my stomach tightening. "What kind of decision?" "I want to try it," she said, her tone carefully measured. "An open relationship. I think it's what I need to feel fulfilled, and I'd like us to explore it together." "Together?" I said, my voice dripping with disbelief. "How exactly does this work? You date other people while I sit at home pretending everything's fine?" Her expression hardened. It's not about dating other people. It's about expanding what our relationship means. You could explore too, if you wanted. This isn't just about me, James. I stared at her, my chest tight with anger and hurt. You're asking me to give up everything I thought this relationship was. Everything I thought we were building together. For what? So you can see if the grass is greener on the other side? It's not like that, she said, her voice rising. This doesn't have to be the end of us. It could make us stronger, more connected? I interrupted, standing abruptly. You want to feel connected? Try being honest about why you're really doing this. Because it sure as hell doesn't feel like it's about us. That afternoon, I went for a long walk, trying to clear my head. The streets of our neighborhood were quiet, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot as I replayed our conversation over and over. Part of me wanted to believe Kelly, that this wasn't about replacing me or pushing me away, but about something deeper. But the larger part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, that she was slipping through my fingers no matter how hard I tried to hold on. By the time I got back to the apartment, I'd made a decision of my own. I'll do it, I said as I walked through the door, my voice. Can a cheater still love their partner? Write in the comments. Flat. Kelly looked up from the couch, surprised. What? You want an open relationship? Fine. Let's do it. But don't expect me to sit here and wait while you figure out what you want. If this is what you need, then I'll play by the same rules. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she seemed taken aback. But then she nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. I just want us to try, she said softly. I want us to be happy. The rules were simple, or at least, they seemed that way. We'd be honest about our intentions, communicate openly, and prioritize our relationship above all else. But even as we set those boundaries, I knew they were nothing more than words. In reality, we were walking into uncharted territory, and neither of us had any idea what we were doing. The first few weeks were awkward, to say the least. We tiptoed around each other, avoiding the subject of exploring, while pretending everything was normal. But then Kelly came home one evening, her cheeks flushed and her smile brighter than I'd seen in weeks. Had a good day? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I met someone. His name's Ethan. We got coffee after work. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to smile. That's great. Don't worry, she said quickly. It was just coffee. Nothing serious. But the way she said his name told me all I needed to know. That night, as Kelly slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced with images of her with Ethan, laughing at his jokes, sharing the easy intimacy we used to have. If this was the freedom she wanted, then fine. But I wasn't going to let her have it without understanding exactly what it cost. I picked up my phone and started scrolling through dating apps. Swiping through profiles on a dating app felt surreal, like I'd stepped into a world I didn't belong in. The last time I'd been single, apps like this didn't even exist. Yet there I was, staring at photos of strangers, trying to figure out what to say in a world I didn't want to be part of. It wasn't about revenge. At least, that's what I told myself. It was about evening the playing field, about seeing what Kelly thought was so liberating about exploring connections. I matched with someone within an hour. Her name was Amanda, a marketing consultant with a quick wit and a smile that felt genuine even through a screen. Our first date was casual, a drink at a trendy bar downtown. Amanda was charming, confident, and refreshingly straightforward. So, she said, leaning against the bar with a knowing smile, what's a guy like you doing on an app like this? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. It's complicated, I said finally. Complicated how? she pressed, raising an eyebrow. I'm in an open relationship, I admitted, bracing for her reaction. To my surprise, she didn't flinch. Ah, she said, nodding thoughtfully. Testing the waters, huh? Something like that, I replied, sipping my drink. Amanda didn't push further, and for the rest of the night, we talked about everything but relationships. She was funny, insightful, and genuinely interesting, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. When I got home, Kelly was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. How was your night? She asked, her tone casual but her eyes curious. It was fine, I replied, setting my keys on the counter. Did you meet someone? I hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. Yeah, her name's Amanda. We got drinks. Kelly's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. That's great. I'm glad you're putting yourself out there. Her words sounded supportive, but the tension in her posture told a different story. Over the next few weeks, things got messy. Kelly and Ethan started seeing each other regularly, and while she was careful not to flaunt it, the signs were there. The extra effort she put into her appearance before leaving the house, the way she'd come home humming a tune under her breath. At the same time, my connection with Amanda deepened. We started texting daily, meeting up for coffee or dinner whenever we could fit it into our schedules. She was everything I didn't know I needed: fun, grounded, and completely uninterested in drama. But the more time I spent with Amanda, the more I realized how far Kelly and I had drifted. One night, after Kelly came home late again, I decided to test the waters. How's Ethan? I asked casually as she set her purse down. She froze, her back to me. He's fine. Why? Just curious, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. You seem to be spending a lot of time with him. Kelly turned to face me, her expression defensive. That's the point of this, isn't it? Exploring connections? Sure, I said, leaning back in my chair. But it feels like you're more invested in him than you are in us. That's not fair, she said, her voice rising. I've been doing everything I can to make this work, James. You're the one who agreed to this. And I'm starting to think it was a mistake. I shot back. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. That night, I texted Amanda. You free for a drink tomorrow? I need to talk. Her reply came quickly. Of course. You okay? Not really. I'll explain tomorrow. As I lay in bed, Kelly asleep beside me, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd already made my decision without realizing it. The bar Amanda and I met at the next night was quieter than usual, dimly lit with soft jazz playing in the background. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a glass of wine in hand. Hey, she said, smiling as I slid into the seat across from her. You look stressed. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. That's putting it mildly. Amanda tilted her head, studying me. What's going on? I hesitated for a moment, then decided to lay it all out. It's this open relationship thing, I said. I thought I could handle it, but it's turning into a disaster. Kelly and we're barely talking anymore. She's so caught up with this guy, Ethan, and I feel like I'm just here, trying to keep something alive that's already dead. Amanda's expression softened. I'm sorry, James. That sounds incredibly hard. It is, I admitted. But the weird thing is, spending time with you has been the only part of this that feels real. Like I'm not just going through the motions. She looked down at her glass, her fingers tracing the rim. I'm glad I've been able to be that for you. But if I'm being honest, it's hard to ignore that there's someone else in the picture, even if it's supposed to be open. I know, I said, guilt twisting in my chest. and I don't want to put you in that position. You deserve better than being someone's escape. Amanda gave me a sad smile. You're not a bad guy, James. But maybe it's time to figure out what you really want. Her words stayed with me as I walked home that night. What did I want? For months, I'd been trying to make sense of Kelly's idea of an open relationship, bending myself into knots to accommodate her desires while ignoring my own. I walked into the apartment to find Kelly sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. "Where were you?" she asked. "Out," I replied shortly, heading for the kitchen. "Out with Amanda?" I stopped in my tracks, turning to face her. "Yeah. Is that a problem?" Kelly set her phone down, crossing her arms. "No. It's just, you've been spending a lot of time with her lately." I couldn't help but laugh, the sound bitter and sharp. "Are you seriously saying that right now? After everything with Ethan?" "That's different," she said defensively. "How is it different?" I snapped. "You're the one who wanted this, Kelly. You're the one who pushed for an open relationship. And now that I'm actually participating, you're acting jealous?" "I'm not jealous," she said, her voice rising. "I'm just concerned. I don't want this to ruin what we have." "What we have?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "Kelly, what do we even have anymore? Because it sure as hell doesn't feel like a relationship." The argument that followed was the worst one we'd ever had. Every unspoken resentment, every lingering hurt, came spilling out like poison. "You're so focused on yourself," I said, pacing the room. "On what you need, what you want. Did you ever stop to think about how this would affect me? How it would feel to watch you fall for someone else right in front of me?" "I wasn't falling for anyone," she shouted, tears streaming down her face. "I just wanted to feel free, James. I wanted to feel like I wasn't trapped in this box, like I could still explore who I am." "And where does that leave me?" I demanded. "What about who I am? Do I not matter in all of this?" Her silence was all the answer I needed. That night, I slept on the couch, unable to face her. The apartment felt suffocating, the walls closing in as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I knew deep down that this wasn't just about the open relationship. It was about everything we'd been avoiding for years, the cracks in our foundation, the ways we'd grown apart without realizing it. And for the first time, I wondered if we'd already reached the end. The morning after the argument, the apartment was unbearably quiet. Kelly was still asleep when I grabbed a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the empty street below. I knew what had to happen, but that didn't make it any easier. By the time Kelly woke up, I'd been sitting there for over an hour, rehearsing the words in my head. She shuffled into the kitchen, her eyes puffy from crying, and froze when she saw me. "Morning," she said softly, as if testing the waters. I nodded. "Morning." She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from me, her hands wrapped tightly around the mug. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. "Kelly," I said finally, breaking the silence, "we need to talk." Her shoulders tensed, and she set the mug down, her eyes meeting mine. "Okay." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "This isn't working. The open relationship, the arguments, everything, it's tearing us apart." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't interrupt. "I've been trying to make this work for months," I continued, my voice trembling. "I've bent over backward to meet you halfway, but the truth is, we're not on the same page anymore. Maybe we never were." "Don't say that," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's true," I said gently but firmly. "I love you, Kelly. I always will." But love isn't enough when we're pulling in opposite directions. She wiped at her eyes, her lips trembling. So what are you saying? That it's over? I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. I think it has to be. For both of us. The next few days were a blur of packing and quiet conversations as we figured out how to untangle our lives. Kelly decided to stay with a friend until she could find a more permanent place, and I agreed to keep the apartment for the time being. Our last night together was strangely peaceful. We ordered takeout, watched a movie, and didn't talk about what was coming. For a few hours, it felt like we were back to being us, two people who loved each other and didn't yet know how to let go. But the moment couldn't last. When she left the next morning, she stood by the door with her bags in hand, looking at me with tear-filled eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything." "I know," I replied, my chest tight. "Me too." She hesitated for a moment, like she wanted to say more, but then she nodded and walked out the door. And just like that, she was gone. The first few weeks without Kelly were harder than I'd expected. The apartment felt too quiet, too empty, and every little reminder of her, a forgotten hair tie, a playlist we used to listen to, brought a fresh wave of grief. But slowly, I started to heal. Amanda and I stayed in touch, though our relationship never progressed beyond friendship. She'd been a lifeline during some of my darkest moments, but we both knew there was too much baggage between us to build something real. I threw myself into work, started going to the gym again, and reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during my time with Kelly. Bit by bit, I began to rebuild. One evening, months after Kelly had left, I got a text from her. "Hey, I just wanted to say I hope you're doing okay. I'm figuring things out, and I think you were right about us needing to let go. Take care, James." I stared at the message for a long time, a mix of emotions swirling in my chest. Finally, I typed out a response. "Thanks, Kelly. I hope you find what you're looking for. Take care of yourself, too." As I set my phone down, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in months, I wasn't angry or bitter. I was just okay. Life didn't look the way I thought it would, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. One step at a time.